Hi everybody, this is a presentation that takes over from the version 2 presentation that Sandy gave the beginning of June, and we're going to talk about the changes in OMTT from 2.0 to 2.4. So back in June, Sandy went through this whole testing challenges, the need and desire for a tool like OMTT. Those ideas are still prevalent at this point, version 2.4. It's still consistent. Take a look at these. If you have not seen the prior recording at version 2.0, that will go into a lot more detail about the overall benefit challenge of OMTT, why we're bringing it to market, that sort of a thing. But this really focuses on just the changes since that point in time. I wanted to touch on the changes since version 2.0. One of those ways that we can do it is graphically. We have the whole overview from a features perspective on this slide, and these areas highlighted with the red box are those areas where we've incorporated changes. So textually, let's talk about those. There's just a handful of things. One is we provided support for multi-applicant test cases. Prior to this, in version 2.0 and before, we really didn't allow support for request-oriented collections for multi-applicant. And now we do have that feature, we do have that capability. We have made some changes in the dictionary. Specifically, we've allowed keys or programmed for keys to be used with requests, so that when you have input collections that you're identifying, you can specify which instance of that collection you want some attribute replacements to apply to. Big important part of the functionality. We've got that in and working now. We've also made some changes with the utility that transforms the schema into the dictionary, so a person doesn't have to create a dictionary from scratch. That's a big help. We've also improved some of the user interface for reporting, making those areas easier to find, easier to identify the report you want, things like that. Then lastly, when we do our compare processing, where we compare our actual results to our expected results, historically we'd only been able to base those compares on this equality operator, and we have included additional operators so that if you've got the type of logic that really dictates that you consider something more complex than an equal operator, you can do that. And so that's quite a handy feature as well. So let's talk about these, just a couple of sentences about each one, go into a little more detail. Regarding the support for multi-applicant test cases, let's take this for example, right? We have a requirement for a rule, and it suggests that we look at an applicant, and that applicant is a cosigner type applicant, a 1, 2, or 3. The key thing is that they're not a primary applicant. So typically what you're going to have in your data entry, your request file, is you're going to identify a primary applicant, obviously, but then you're also going to identify a secondary cosigner style applicant. And it's both of those things, having those in the request and being able to identify those in the test case representation, that it's going to allow us to override the values in this second applicant so that we can take advantage of this particular rule execution. By doing this, we're able to illustrate what the expected values should be for that particular test case. We can see 702-002-F highlights the fact that a cosigner has a bureau score of 619, and that's going to cause this to be able to be successfully fired, ultimately producing a lot of other values, and we can see what some of those other values are here. From the rule number to the status of F to the reason code, K002, and a description. And when we review all of that information in the corresponding report, which is the actual versus expected value report, we can see that 702-002-F, the comparison between those things, and in this case it is an equality check, right? It's not taking advantage of any of those other things that we talked about before, which were the complex operators. But in this case it is checking for equality, and we can see that these two values are equal, these two values are equal, these two, and these two. and it gives us the corresponding true response that we're hoped for. So that wraps up the multi-applicant feature. Now, from a dictionary improvement standpoint, we touched on a number of things that we've done to improve things. One is we've enhanced the ignore if empty flag. And this is an element in the dictionary that allows the test case to have a blank value in the list of possible input values, and that if this ignore if empty flag is designated as a Y, then OMTT is not going to attempt to put that blank value in the request file. Prior to this, we were finding that condition, and it was potentially problematic when we went to execute the request files, so we incorporated this feature here. We have the ability to turn this ignore if empty flag on the individual attribute level or at the instance level as well. So you can see in the dictionary how that's done. I'll point that out. The second thing is this key functionality, and we talked about this briefly. With the input request, there is a mapping that shows the understanding of what in that input request collection is the key, so that when you do attribute replacement, you know that you're replacing in the right instance, right? We'll touch on that. And then, like I said, the XSD utility, go from XSD to dictionary. We've made some improvements there and some progressions based on what people were finding in their transformation of the XSD to dictionary. Another enhancements that is part of the version 2.4 is the idea of reports and where they fall. We've actually changed the location in 2.0, and before it used to be embedded underneath this edit toolbar, and now we've created a separate location where you can simply click, and then the canned reports that are made available to OMTT fall down as a function of that. We think that this is going to be an easier way to navigate to the reporting part of our facility. And then the next thing is in the actual versus expected results, the introduction of these complex operators allows us to do some pretty complex actual versus expected value compares. You can see here where the operator is providing us the ability to compare in a different way rather than just straight equality. Traditionally, what we'd have is 0, 0 here, 0, 0 here, be based on equality, it would say true. But now we have the ability to do other things as well. We can say equality but not give it the right value, so ultimately provide a false path for this to adhere to. And the fact that these compare operators allow us to stretch the metaphor of comparing objects. Rather than just strict equality compares, we're able to introduce the whole range of potentially complex compare operators. And you can see how it's illustrated here, the expected value. And in each of these test cases, whether it's a true or a false, they represent the correct scenario, right? So this test case is generated for it to intentionally fail. And it does in fact fail based on the compare operator here. You can see that 0 is not equal to 1, and that is intentionally meant to fail. So you've got a number of passing test cases and a couple of failing test cases. In this case, 0 not equal to the same thing, 0, 0, that fails because it is in fact equal. And an alternate representation for the not equal to symbol. And then you can go down the list and you can see that each of these results are in fact the results that we're expecting. So let's take a look at where we were in June, beginning of June. Let's take a look at where we are now at the middle of July, and then some outlying futuristic features as well. You can see that in the June version, we had a whole host of capabilities. All those are relayed in Sandy's review. I'll attach a URL that shows that particular location. And then in this current one, the one we're talking about now, version 2.4, we've done a good number of these. Multi-applicants, fixed to the dictionary, some high priority usability enhancements, including the user interface and the reporting, capability and the multi-compare capability. All of those are part of those usability enhancements. The one that we have not gotten to yet is the zip file creation. It's kind of a lower priority item, and we basically rolled it over into the futures list. We do have a new utility that we're proposing in the future, and it really surrounds the ability to auto-generate an OMTT test case file from existing request files. Now that's going to be quite a handy thing if you have a customer that already has an existing system and you really want to build out the OMTT test sheet to mimic that. We're hoping to be able to create that utility to auto-populate the test sheet, the dictionary, through a series of step-by-step processes. So more on that later. We'll let you know how that goes. We're hoping that won't take more than a couple, 2 to 3 weeks. So stay tuned on that one. Obviously, these other things that we've talked about, but one thing that I should note is that OMTT development is going to be slowing way down. We've been doing quite a big push to get this utility out there and ready. We feel that it's 90% usable right now. We haven't had a whole lot of feedback in terms of things to change or capabilities. And so we feel like it's a good preliminary release point. And so until we have a need for bigger changes or bigger support, other ideas, we're going to be slowing way down on OMTT development. This new utility is probably going to be the last thing that we really touch on in earnest. Okay, from a summary standpoint, still the same type of design focus that we talked about in the 2.0 timeframe. None of those things have really changed. The mission of OMTT has not really changed, but there has been some changes to the status, obviously. From an OMTT status perspective, we do have a number of projects that are using it. We've got a number that are interested in it, moving forward with it. That's a very positive step. We're also developing some potentially regression-based test beds, custom characteristics, others that people can take and use as templates for the testing process to allow their testing to move forward better and faster than before. And like I just highlighted, the plans to extend the functionality of OMTT are scaling way back, and there's only going to be small changes with maybe the exception of that one utility that I just talked about. So there you have it in a nutshell. From a user guide perspective and a downloadable and executable perspective, you can see that these are the locations that you can still go to acquire those things. Again, my name is Dave Heckroth. If you have any questions about the product, the usage, or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. Of course, if you have relationships with other people on the team, feel free to reach out to them as well. But I'm happy to help you, do demos for you, things like that, help you get jump started with your project. So keep me posted. Let me know how you like it. If there's anything I can do to help, or you have ideas about how to move the product forward, please let me know. We're always interested in your ideas. Okay. That's all there is for now. OMTT update version 2.4 over and out.